A painting, you can go and look at it again. A book you can reread. A film you can see again. But food is ephemeral. It's like music. It's like going and seeing a concert. I think there's more of a connection between music and food than a painting.
You're listening to the Taste Podcast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Matt Rodbard, here with Senior Editor Anna Hezel.
Today, Matt's talking to David Kinch, a cookbook author and the chef-owner at Manresa in Northern California. Later, Max Felkowitz will answer a question from a listener. But Matt, tell me about your conversation with David Kinch.
David Kinch, living legend. I love David. We talked about his restaurant Manresa and how he looks at service and how he looks at the food and really what goes into running one of America's top restaurants. We also talk about the old school and we look back at some of his earlier days cooking in kitchens around the world. It's a great conversation.
Here's Matt talking to David Kinch.
David Kinch, welcome to the Taste Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's exciting to have you in New York. You're usually in the Bay Area at your restaurants.
Yes.
But you're here. You did a dinner, but you also have been cooking and researching pastas. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we're opening up a restaurant at the end of the summer. It's going to be a casual concept, but I think it's going to be fun, and I want it to be authentic, and I want it to have a certain sense of quality. So I'm trying to learn as much about pastas as I can, seeing various production techniques, different shapes and sizes, and see how everybody does certain things so I can decide how I want to do it myself.
That's cool. And Mentone will be the restaurant. And tell us a little bit about how, what is your point of view on an Italian restaurant? We'll be talking about Manresa, but I'd like to hear about just entering that world.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is it's not really an Italian restaurant.
Oh, okay.
I like to think of it as a cuisine of the Riviera. We are doing we are going to try and do a fun and casual interpretation of the cuisine between Nice and Genoa, which, of course, it straddles the border. It straddles both France and Italy. So people say it's an Italian restaurant. Yes, it is. I guess half of it is. So, I mean, in terms of geopolitical border, it's really difficult to describe. But there's a lot of similarity along that stretch. That part of France was part of Italy 150 years ago. I think the products and the sensibilities and how certain things go together are very similar to what we have along our central coast of California, which is where the real appeal is for me.
Yeah, and this is where you've established a career for the last several years. So, but tell me, we're talking about butter over olive oil, right? In this cooking,
we're talking about olive oil over butter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, correct me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have pizzas, we're going to have pastas, we're going to have some really simple salads and a lot of fun interpretive dishes. Mentone is the Italian name for the French border town of Mentone. It's a French town, but it's right there on the border, so I think it gives a good sense of what we're trying to find. I describe it as a cuisine of the Riviera.
I cannot wait to check it out, and it's in Santa Cruz.
It's in Aptos, which is a small town about 7 miles south of Santa Cruz.
Oh.
So it's going to be close to where I live. I'm a longtime resident of Santa Cruz.
So let's go back a bit. I want to hear about New York in the 80s because you worked at Quilted Giraffe, and I
don't remember. No,
you remember. I've met you. I've interviewed you on this topic years ago, and it was such a great interview. I wanted to have you on the podcast just to hear a little bit about this time at Quilted Giraffe. We often don't think about Quilted Giraffe as this established restaurant in New York because it just was a while ago. Mm-hmm. We think about some of the older guard like the Le Bernardins and the Danielles. But Quilted Giraffe was a super influential place. You were cooking there in 1985. Take us back to that time.
I think the Quilted Giraffe, it got 4 stars in the New York Times in the early 80s, and it maintained it through its entire tenure in New York City as a restaurant. And I think its big influence was it was the first American restaurant, at least during that time, that kind of broke through the French hegemony of, the Les and La restaurants that were around at that time. Everything was kind of controlled by the old guard French. Really well established. They came up through respected ranks. and there was a system and a brigade and a certain way of doing things. And Barry and Susan Wine, they kind of came in. They were self-taught. They had a distinctly American point of view. They were really idiosyncratic in how they approached things. They asked a lot of questions, why things were done a certain way. And I got to hand it to them. They kind of broke through. And
fair to say the birth of new American cuisine?
I think they were certainly a part of it. I don't know if they actually birthed the cuisine, but their work certainly heightened the awareness of the possibility and the potential that we had in America, especially in fine dining restaurants.
And you worked alongside Tom Colicchio among many chefs. What were some of the dishes that really kind of were innovated there? Because I like the le and la, the death of the le and la, or the evolution, I'll say. But what are some of the dishes that really are iconic from that era?
Well, there was some really hedonistic dishes. I mean, I guess the most famous thing was the caviar beggar's purses, which you kind of ate with your hand. But the menu changed often. It changed quite seasonally. We used a lot of product from Barry's farm that was up in New Paltz at the time, which was really kind of way ahead of the game as well. But when I first staged there, I was coming back from France. I had worked in France for a year, and I was coming back and I was looking for a place to work. And I spent 2 days in the kitchen there, and I was shocked at what I saw. The food was light. It was delicious. It was incredibly colorful. There was a real emphasis on vegetables and fruits as part of the dishes. And there was just a real vibrancy that I really hadn't seen anywhere, even in France. When I was,
you were letting these vegetables speak as opposed to manipulate.
Well, they were. I mean, it was really, really just something completely different, and that's what attracted me there. And I spent a good part of the majority of my time in New York was spent working in the kitchens.
Take us back to post-shift, the myth of the post-shift meal, going out and having some drinks after shift. Where were you eating in New York in 85, 86, 87 after your shift? It's a crazy time in the city's history. I want to hear about some of those spots.
There was a period of time about halfway through my time at the Quilted Giraffe where the cuisine took a decidedly Asian shift. Barry and Susan went on vacation to Japan, and he came back a pretty transformed guy. He brought back a lot of dishes and a lot of ideas and the food actually took a really dramatic turn during that time, and we learned a lot about a lot of different things. We kind of learned as we went, but post shift, everybody started going to these Midtown Japanese restaurants, especially the ones that were open later. There was a lot of restaurants that were basement restaurants, kind of word of mouth. They were open late, and we started frequenting a lot of them.
Were they izakayas? Were you seeing noodles like soba and ramen? I'm just really curious about how...
It was more of an izakaya,
izakaya
thing. But it was all new. Yeah. I mean, it was all exotic and it was all new. Sushi was fairly exotic back then. But just the other types of cooking, the grilling, the steaming, and all that sort of stuff, we all became quite enamored with it.
And you continued your fascination in travels to Japan are legendary. Is that what started it? That time at Quilted Giraffe?
I think that was a big part of it. I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to Asian food, but Japanese in particular, because of the precision. But I think and the emphasis on the eye, on things looking really, really pretty, but for me, the main reason is I look because they extract a tremendous amount of flavor and they find a lot of balance in their cooking with an absolute minimum amount of fat in the cooking. And nowadays, I think that is quite important. For me, fine dining, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what fine dining is. I still think it's an idea factory. I think new ideas start. I think a lot of really small revolutionary concepts. God is in the details. start there and spread out. And I think part of the responsibility of fine dining nowadays is not only making food that is thought-provoking and perhaps a bit provocative, but it's also delicious. But I think we need to concentrate a little bit more on health and well-being and responsibility, sustainability issues. And so it's this not gratuitous use of fat that I find really
important. And you bring up a lot of topics, point of view, creativity, traveling through food. All of those are emblematic of the art world. Those are all things we observe in the art world. We write often at In Taste. We've written several essays about food and art and how they merge. Is food art? David Kinch, can you answer that question? Is food art?
Well, food is a craft. I mean, 98, 99% of the food that we eat, it's fuel, it's sustenance. Again, I think health and well-being and nutrition are stepping up to the forefront, which I think is really, really great. But in terms of art, there's very few artists. I think we only have an artist or two a generation. But things move fast nowadays. Attention spans wane really easy. So things are moving so fast, it's really hard to pinpoint. Food, in terms of food itself being art, you know what? I find that hard to believe. You have a dish, you eat it, and then it's gone. And then what happens is it becomes a memory. And then your memory plays tricks on it. A dish or a meal can grow in stature in your mind over time, and it can decrease as well. It can, as your reference points become more and more fine-tuned, then you say, well, maybe it wasn't that good, and you can't revisit it. It's a memory. You can go and have the same dish, but depending on who you're with, the mood you were in, and that's where that memory starts. A painting, you can go and look at it again. A book you can reread. A film you can see again. But food is ephemeral. It's like music. It's like going and seeing a concert. I think there's more of a connection between music and food than a painting hanging on the wall.
Very good statement. I respect that. I think it even builds the case for why Michelin is important and reviewers are important because we do have this. There's a fleeting sense about the gravity of a meal because you are having one 6 hours later, 8 hours later. You're having coffee. Really well said. Let's talk about critics and. You have a new one in the Bay Area, Soleil Ho.
Yes, we do.
I wanted to ask you, just in general, how do you feel about having a new, there was a long-standing critic in the Bay Area, and now there's a new point of view. How do you feel about that?
To be honest, I don't think much about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we do what we do. We don't cook for critics. We don't cook for Michelin. I mean, I may have evolved on that. I think I may have placed a greater importance on it, but I've come to realize that, you do what we do. We do what we were trained to do, what we love to do, and you let certain things fall into place. You can't control what people are going to write about you. You can't control what they're going to think about it. You can do your best you can. You can take care of them. Maybe you recognize them, maybe you don't. But ultimately, I think your success is going to be based upon you cooking for your guests and you cooking, being true to yourself. If you are cooking for stars or good reviews or for PR or to be famous, then I think you tend to be disappointed in waiting a long time.
And you have a shorter career, I feel.
Yeah, well,
I feel like if you do it for the wrong reasons. But let's talk about Manresa. What's happening at the restaurant? There's been quite an evolution there. What's exciting now? We're entering spring into summer in Central California, or the Bay Area. We'll call it what it is.
If the rain ever stops.
Oh, yeah. It's been a wet. That's right.
It's
wet winter.
It's either raining or on fire.
Oh, boy.
That's the story of our state the past year. Well, Manresa, we turned 17 years old this July, which is a lifetime in this restaurant business. I love going to work every day. I think the restaurant now, my job at the restaurant is to create a certain sense of dynamism, dynamic, moving forward. Every day we try to incrementally be a little bit better, attention to detail, whether it is trying to find better product, better quality product, how we prepare it. Everything is geared in towards the guest experience. And, I try not to blow my horn or anything like that, but my feeling is right now is that Manresa is a better restaurant now than it's ever been. And I'm very, very happy about that.
The hours are long, and I wanted to ask you, how do you keep your staff motivated, or are they seeking out employment with you because of the stature of the restaurant and the ideas that you're furthering there?
Well, I think people, young cooks, it's what drew me to working at great restaurants is, you want to go someplace where perhaps you can learn as much as possible. You advance your career, build your resume. But also, I like to think it's, perhaps a work environment too. I like to think that our work environment is quite positive in a kitchen. I like to retain people, partly because I hate to train people. Training people involves a lot of time. It involves a lot of money. It's a lot of time, through HR and all that sort of stuff. A revolving door of people coming and working for you for 9 months or a year. I'd rather have cooks stay for 2.5 to 3 years, because not only do they perform really well, with a certain sense of ease, but it creates a kind of a familial atmosphere. People know what other people's patterns are, and I think that is something that translates into the intangible happiness of the guests. I really truly believe that. But my job is, we're open for dinner only. We're open for only 5 days a week. It is indeed a long day, but the cooks and the staff have 2 days off. We encourage them to work hard and to play hard, to relax and be recharged. I like to think the cooks in the station, they have a great work area. They have heat source. They have refrigeration. They have counter space. They have natural light from the sunshine outdoors. They have water source. They have everything there to do their job properly in a positive work environment. And what I ask for in return is absolute perfection.
Yeah, of course, and that's you're giving them the tools. And I wanted to equate it to the Broadway play or musical. It seems like with only 5 nights of service, only doing dinner, you have less stage time than a Broadway musical. Does it feel like stage time when your doors are open, guests are in seats?
Absolutely. A restaurant is,
not all restaurants are like that, I'll say. I'm heading to the Cheesecake Factory later today, happen to be there. It's going to be a little different than Manresa.
No, I know, I get it. I get it. But, that's the whole point. It's my restaurant. Manresa is my baby. It's the flagship.
Sure.
We're doing other projects now, which are fun and exciting, but they're all tend to be casual. But Manresa is, it has a life of its own and a stature of its own, which I greatly appreciate. But a cook can be sick. A server or a captain can be sick or hurts themselves. Maybe the fish came in and we're not going to use it because it's not the quality we want. Guests don't want to hear about that. They don't care about that at 5:30 or 7:30 or whenever they're coming in. It's showtime. You can't let them know about your anxieties or your shortcomings or what situation you're in. When the curtain goes up, your smile's on your face, and you do it.
It's an amazing event when you go to a meal and have a meal like at Manresa. It really feels like there is theater there. So I'm happy that we could draw that parallel. Speaking of drama and theatrics, you are in New York. We're in New York now, and you dined at Danielle for the first time.
I did.
Danielle. Sorry, I called Danielle.
I did.
Wow, the place is also like Manresa, kind of a legend. What was that like?
Yeah, it was. Well, I'm in town. I was in town to cook for an event called Le Paulet, which is a Burgundian wine organization that involves tons of winemakers. All the winemakers come. They do it every year. Obviously, they do it in Burgundy every year, but they do it every year in the United States as well. And it goes back and forth between San Francisco and New York, alternating years. And this year was New York. Danielle invited me to cook along with Melissa Rodriguez, very, very charming and fantastic chef at Del Posto, César Toigreau from Toigreau in France. and of course Danielle and
Of Bolu.
Yes, Danielle Bolu, and he invited me into the restaurant, and I had never been, and it was a fantastic experience. If you know Danielle, he's got so much energy. He does not stop, just positive energy. So
what was the one course that really stuck out in your mind?
Well, what was funny is that when we came into the restaurant and we sat down at the table, and they said, "Well, Danielle wants to see you guys in the kitchen." So we get up, and it's like you're moving around, and you go in the back, and Danielle and Cesar are in the middle of plating dishes for a banquet. They're doing a banquet for one of the wine domains, one of the French wine domains, for 60 people, and they're back there, and they have us there, and they start giving us food, the entrees that are going out. We haven't even been into the restaurant 5 minutes, and we're already eating these fantastic torts stuffed with preserves of cep mushrooms and scallops. And literally 5 minutes in, walking the door, we're eating an entree before we had anything at the table. So that was really fantastic. That was really a memorable moment.
And then you're seated and you have your meal?
And then we seated, and then we went and had our meal, yeah.
Yeah. You've written a book, Manresa, with Christine Mulkey for 10 Speed Press. Really iconic book. I wanted to ask you, is there a follow-up in the works? We ask all guests,
Yes.
I guess we could go back and say we ask all guests, if you were to have your dream cookbook project, what would that project be?
Well, I am working on another book. I'm starting to move a proposal around right now, and I'm pretty excited about it. It is all recipes are accessible. I mean, Manresa, the first book, we didn't compromise on how we did it. It was a conscious decision that we made, and we realized that some people would find things perhaps too ambitious or too time-consuming to do, but we wanted to paint a real true picture about the work and the thought processes that went in behind the dishes that we do. This one is completely different. I love to cook. I'm in this. Mm-hmm. I do what I do not because of the restaurant business, but because of the physical act of cooking. It's something that gives me great pleasure, great joy. Still does. I cook on my days off. I cook for friends and family on my days off. So these recipes will be centered more around what I cook for myself, what could I cook for friends, and doing it at home.
That sounds so exciting. What are some of the what did you make when you have a free moment for your friends?
Well, I have a lot of dinner parties. Yeah. I do a lot of dinner parties where we open up oysters, we drink good wines, we cook food that's really simple. We either cook it on a grill or in the kitchen. We fool around with a lot of different things, and that's what I want is a collection of recipes that everybody looks at and feels that they would attempt it. They don't feel intimidated by it. I don't want anything to have really more than 5 ingredients in it. I don't want anything. If you can't find it at Whole Foods, then the product's not going to be in it. So that's what we're doing.
I can't wait to read it. Thank you for joining the Taste Podcast, David Kinch.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Here's Max Felkowitz tackling a listener question.
Hey, Max, we have a question from a listener for you.
Tell me, what is it?
Why is vanilla so expensive?
So this is a question people ask a lot when they're shopping for vanilla beans, and the real answer is vanilla beans aren't expensive enough because they're propagated by a tropical vine that only grows in really specific climatic conditions, and it's really hard, virtually impossible to cultivate these vines. They basically only grow wild. And it takes about 2 to 4 years for them to grow a pod that's the size and shape of a string bean, and that can only be picked once it hits a certain ripeness. And then it takes about 6 months of curing the bean in these blankets under the hot sun until you turn it from this little fresh string bean into this dark, shrivelly, wrinkled, super fragrant vanilla bean. On top of that, the vines can only be pollinated 1 day a year by wild bees. And on top of that, the last 2 years of harvests have been really bad. So 2018 prices were like $600 a kilogram, and that's on the wholesale market. So don't expect to be seeing any like decreases in prices in vanilla for the foreseeable future. But on the plus side, this means that more people are getting to enjoy vanilla and getting to realize why it's so good.
So I should stop groaning next time I buy a bottle and it's so expensive.
It's one of those things where we get to appreciate how much these foods were valued back before industrial agriculture was possible and why they're considered so precious. And it should give us a newfound appreciation for this weird little plant that we take for granted.
Thanks, Max.
Here's an interview with Louisiana chef Isaac Toups. Isaac Toups, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
We've just been talking about this cookbook cover. Listener, you should go right to Amazon or go to your indie store, pick it off the shelf, take a look at it because it is like my favorite of the year. It's such a great cover.
Thank you. And buy it as well. I mean, pick it up, go to Amazon, but
yes,
click on buy as well.
Definitely.
We love you.
Buy it. But I want to take us through the cover because you're smiling. You have this shaker of a powder, and then you're tossing these fried nuggets that look like tater tots, but they're probably not. Explain the cover, please, Isaac.
Yeah, I'll take it from here. So the shaker of spice is crack spice because those are cracklins I'm tossing in the bowl. So cracklins are pretty much put me on the map in New Orleans, and they're traditionally called gratons, but that's the old French word for it. But they're a double fried skin on pork belly. So it's like a chicharron, but instead of just having crispy skin, you have this crispy skin and the meaty meat and the juicy fat, and that's what makes them the cracklin. So there's pretty much, I put out the best in New Orleans, and no, I'm not shy about it.
No,
challenge me.
And honestly, sounds very chefy, but you can actually make this dish at home.
You can make this dish if you can get skin on pork belly. You might have to go to the Asian store, the Spanish store to get skin on pork belly, but it's a simple recipe, but it's very technique driven. So even though it's 2 ingredients to make, it's hog lard and skin on pork belly, it's almost like making risotto. You got to do it a couple times and you have to pay attention to it the whole time.
But what a party trick to bring out this dish.
Oh my God, you would be labeled a badass if you could pull this off and bring this to a party. Yeah, but I walk you through it, and we worked really hard to make sure that the recipes work. So it's not just lists of recipes and all willy-nilly.
Well, congrats on the cover and the book. We'll talk about that. But let's talk about the book, Chasing the Gator. Has been called the Cajun Bible. And I want to start by asking you, what exactly is Cajun cooking and what is not Cajun cooking?
Right. Well, first off, the Cajun Bible, that's very intimidating. Wow. I appreciate the compliment, but it might be a little much. So basically, the book is, kind of the telling of my personal story of what I take for Cajun food. And while there's very traditional recipes, cracklins, dirty rice, and boudin in the book, Cajun food is food from the earth and food from the land around us. The Cajuns came from France and to Nova Scotia and then exiled from Canada to South Louisiana, which I don't know how badass you have to be exiled from Canada. Have you been there? They're super nice. And we pick up stuff along the way, but we use what's around us. So people ask, well, why do you use so much pigs and sugarcane and rice and crawfish? It grows all around us. So we take whatever's around the land and use that, and we're very proud of our culture. There's not a lot of places where we kept our roots and we kept our good feelings and we kept all the French backgrounds and using from the land. So we use dark roux and we use those old French techniques, which is kind of fallen off the mainstream, and we still very proud and utilization of our culture. So that's what Cajun food was, and Cajun food is kind of, the Cajuns using modern ingredients and modern techniques. I mean, I live in New Orleans. I trained under Emile Lagasse. I've got all these classic and new techniques to utilize with my Cajun background. I can get almost anything in the world nowadays and put a Cajun spin on that. So that's what Cajun food was, and that's what Cajun food is. At the same time, I call my food contemporary Cajun, but I really hate labeling my food. Because sometimes I want to use an aged Korean soy sauce, and sometimes I want to use dashi from Japan, and those aren't Cajun ingredients, but I'm still using with my grew up and born and raised in Cajun country mentality.
Have you been to France? Have you traveled and had the food there?
Oh yeah, love France. Love Lyon is probably my favorite city.
What a cool city.
On the earth.
What a great food city. I mean, are you finding in parts of France these dishes are being cooked that seem familiar to yourself?
Funny story. So I'm in Lyon, and it was our 10th wedding anniversary, me and my wife. and walk in this little bouchon, and the chef comes out, takes our order, and as he takes our order, he hands me down a little bowl, and it's got cracklings and salami in it. And I looked at him and said, "We're gonna be good friends." So. You find these dishes that are similar, and they're still at the same time, a little more old school. So you get these like, oh man, I've had something like that, but you get the separation of hundreds of years.
You write about the Cajun Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is that? I think it's super interesting. I've never heard about it before.
Trinity, I mean, almost every culture with a good food quality has their own version of Trinity. So the French have mirepoix and also sofrito. So the Cajun Trinity is, the ones that grow around us: celery, onion, and bell pepper. Instead we switch out the bell pepper for carrot.
And mirepoix.
And mirepoix. We also, so the Trinity, those three things, but you always have garlic in there. And that's the one you have to mention. So they say that you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but you have to add the Pope, and the Pope is garlic. And lots of it, too. Don't shy away from garlic.
Yeah, garlic is definitely a lifeblood down in Louisiana. But the bell pepper is interesting to me because it feels like it's a neglected vegetable in cooking, right?
Yeah, it's underutilized.
Yeah.
And the things you could put it in and the versatility of it. And we stuff them, we roast them hard, and then have roasted bell peppers. We make sauces with them. In fact, it's essential for several of my dishes in here, especially my grandmother's red couvillon has to have the red bell pepper for the coloring and the sweetness.
I love that. How much did Justin Wilson inspire you?
Oh, man, as any Cajun boy growing up, Justin Wilson was like the father figure for, even before I got into professional cooking, he was just fun to watch.
Let's explain who he was first, because for me, I thought of Justin Wilson as this iconic, I watched him in the 80s, instructor of food of a place that I'd never been to, never even imagined. As a kid, I didn't even think it was in the United States. The accent, I thought it was a foreign guy.
Right.
But he was on PBS teaching the cuisine of the Cajun, and like the cookbooks of Cajun.
For those of you who don't know, he's pretty much the thick accented wild Cajun Julia Childs. So he's sitting there and he's teaching you, step by step how to make these proper Cajun dishes. He's going to have a sip of his sherry wine while he's cooking. And his accent real thick, bro. I mean, you can only barely understand him if you know what you're talking about. And he's going to tell you a story about hunting, and he's going to tell you a lie, and then he's going to show you how to make these awesome, cool Cajun dishes. He's the godfather of Cajun TV.
So you watched him growing up.
Absolutely.
Oh. And, I mean, did you ever get to interact with him or his family?
I never got to meet him, unfortunately.
Oh, man.
Yeah, missed out on that.
Could you be the next Justin Wilson?
I will be the first Isaac Toups.
Love it.
In the light of Justin Wilson.
I love it. Of course, you are your own person, but I think this cuisine and teaching a new generation about the cooking traditions of Louisiana is kind of important.
Oh, very much so. And we always keep our cultural, again, like very close to the heart, and it's very important to us. As I say in the book, I mean, I want to keep that going, and I want to keep pushing that. So I teach my children how to cook. Mm-hmm. I gave my 7-year-old her first knife at 7, and she's in the kitchen cooking with me. And she may not always eat the things I cook. Mm-hmm. She's a normal kid. But I think it's very important to educate people on what Cajun food is, what it's become, and where it came from. We always remember that, and we still want to share that. I mean, you sit down with a beer, and I'll just talk all day about Cajun food.
And really, I wanted to segue to this kind of observation I've made. I've had Cajun food outside of New Orleans, big air quotes there, but it's never felt real to me. It's never felt like there was something missing. I mean, of course, you can eat Italian food in America that's as good as anywhere in Italy. That's unequivocal. I will go to the mat on that one. But what is it about Cajun food that is so difficult to replicate that in like places like New York City? Like I really haven't had great Cajun food in New York City, Chicago, etc. But we see these restaurants all around.
You bring up a question I can't answer because but it's been said, and this is not my quote, but New Orleans Cajun food and Cajun food in general is only good in South Louisiana. And I don't know why, because I'm in South Louisiana cooking good Cajun food. And it's something I don't really go out and try to find, honestly. Whenever I travel to New York, the last thing I'm going to do is try to find good Cajun food. I'm going to go out and try different things. So it's almost like New York pizza. You can only find good New York pizza in New York for some reason, and I'm not sure why, because people are trying to do it in New Orleans, and they're falling flat on their face.
It has to do with the Cajun Trinity, probably. It probably has to do with maybe not having the right products, right?
I mean, I've come up to New York and cooked good Cajun food at the Beard House and cooked good crawfish at other places. And
yeah.
Maybe it's the know-how. Maybe it's people, what they think is Cajun is not authentic. Maybe you need to have a proper Cajun come up here. I don't know. Someone in New York's doing it.
Isaac, it's a great reason just to go to New Orleans and visit and do some traveling. Tell me, outside of New Orleans, where should I go? I should rent a car, of course. Where should I go?
You should definitely go around proper Cajun country. I was born and raised in Rayne, Louisiana, right outside Lafayette. And around Lafayette area, you can get these little stops of boudin and crackling, and you should go to like a boudin and crackling tour is what you should do.
Oh.
So a lot of places they're gas stations that also sell, sausage and charisse, and you can get a stuffed pork belly called chaudin, and it's essentially it's Cajun haggis, except it's good.
I love it.
Cajun haggis, except it's good. I just pissed off a lot of Scots. Sorry.
I didn't prep you on this question, but I mean, are you an LSU fan by chance?
You have to be. You have to be. You have to be a Saints fan, and you have to be an LSU fan growing up in South Louisiana. No fans or buts.
Let's talk about the tailgating at these games, because I was able to go down there, I think in like 2000, 2001, and I hung out with a guy named the Crew of Ragu who does this epic tailgating spread, and it was like nothing I've ever had at a sporting event. I went to college in the University of Wisconsin, which has great tailgating. So tell me about what's so special about LSU football Saturdays.
The tailgating might actually be better than the game. It's definitely it's revelrous, and Cajuns and South Louisianians don't need an excuse to party, and that is a straight up excuse to party. So you get together, you have a bunch of beer, you put down the tailgate. Somebody's either grilling burgers on a small, or someone has these humongous spreads, and it's almost bragging rights of who has the biggest setup and who has the biggest rig and who's putting out the best food. It's damn near a competition with revelry, and then you go to the game, you're already half lit, you're screaming, you're hollering, "Go Tigers!"
Yeah. Do you ever go to Baton Rouge? Do you ever get to go to those games or hang out in Baton Rouge?
Every once in a while, I'll get to break off, but most of the time, I'm straight up working.
You're working. You run restaurants. I want to know, too, about Popeyes, because you talk about in the book your daughter demanding that your dirty rice be like Popeyes dirty rice.
Right, because, all of us grow up eating Popeyes, and I don't eat fast food unless, of course, it's Popeyes.
I love it.
How's that? Yeah, this is like, no, I don't want fast food. What about Popeyes? Oh, okay. It's just fried chicken, right? It's okay. And so, of course, when we go to order, I have the entire family's order memorized because everybody likes specific things. And my eldest daughter likes the dirty rice. And I was cooking dirty rice, but it didn't look like Popeyes because, mine was made from scratch. And then my wife chimed in like the brilliant woman she is and said, "Poppy, your father taught Popeye how to cook." And I'm like, wow, that was good.
Gangsta.
That was good.
Let's talk about the biscuits, though. Come on. Like, the Popeyes biscuits are kind of iconic, right? They're pretty good.
Though they're good, warm. Once they get cold, you just throw them away.
All that food has to be warm.
Actually, the chicken's okay pretty cold. Cold fried chicken out of the fridge. So I always order a couple extra pieces.
Yeah.
That's all right, yeah.
God, we have a couple Popeyes here in New York. I think I might be going there this afternoon. It's good stuff.
Come with you.
Your photographer, Denny Colbert. He is a great guy. Like, he shoots for Taste. What was that like collaborating with him? I just have to give him a shout out because he's one of my favorite guys.
He's one of my favorite guys.
Yeah.
And we sort of, this friendship way back in the day, I forget exactly how I met him, but I think it was just at a private dinner, and he was taking pictures, and we saw him like, oh man, I want him to come over to my restaurant and shoot my pictures for Instagram. And this is way before the book even was conceived. And I remember he showing me a picture of something. I'm like, wow, Denny, it looks so beautiful. Whose food is that? And just looked at me and goes, "Isaac, that's your food." I'm like, holy hell. So he's able to make my food look less brown and better than it actually looks, like with your eyes, which is just amazing. And the book is just a perfect example of just wonderful photography, wonderful writing, and my jungle mass of a brain that is mine.
I mean, Jennifer, too. Let's talk about Jennifer Cole, because she's an amazing journalist, and this is her first book, right?
This is her first cookbook.
Cookbook, yeah. Cool.
And she's, again, just an amazing part of Team Toups nowadays. And, we made friends, and we were just like, hey, we want to do a book. You want to write it? And she's like, yeah, sure. And we call up Jenny. Hey, Jenny, we writing a book. You want to shoot it? Like, yeah. And I do like to say that Jennifer made it inside my brain and then successfully made it out.
Oh.
Which is difficult to do because I ramble all day. And so she would just put a tape recorder down and we would crack a beer and talk and talk and talk. And she actually had too much information, she said. And it was filtering through all my ramblings and get it down. And the funny part is, so she was writing another article, not about me, but about something else. and had to rewrite it because she wrote it in my vocabulary.
In your voice.
In my voice. She's like, oh my God, I need to. So we actually had to spend some time away from each other for her to equilibrate.
Yeah, that's a good. I think balance her Isaac Toups or excommunicate the Isaac Toups out of her.
Exactly.
I think we landed on a good one there. So tell me about your restaurant. Is there plans for an expansion?
Well, we are at 2, and the second.
I'm sorry, you're at 2. I didn't know.
That's okay. The second restaurant, Toups South.
Oh, okay.
We're right at 2 years.
Oh, great.
So it's still in the brooding toddler stage, and you don't want 2 toddlers at the same time. So expansion's always on the brain. But for right now, we just got the book.
Yeah.
We're focusing on, a little bit of TV stuff and just make sure that the restaurants are locked down. I want the restaurants completely locked down before I open up another one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you spread yourself too thin.
New Orleans is probably, maybe outside of New York, the second tourist destination in America. I'd love to get your thoughts on some other restaurants that you, outside of yours, of course, that you would recommend our listeners visiting when going down to New Orleans, because there's a lot of great restaurants there.
There's a lot of great restaurants down there, and that's a much better question than what's my favorite thing to cook, because that's always get that one, but people should ask, where do I like to eat? Because that's the good question. So probably my number one place to eat right now is Margie's Grill. It's fantastic. Chef Marcus there does some Thai food. He travels to Thailand a lot, and it's just really bright and it's spicy. And his technique with meats and grills and smoking is just completely on point. And it's a little hole in the wall restaurant, which I love. Getting killer food, a hole in the wall restaurant. It's not even that expensive. St. James Cheese Shop is one of my favorites. A Turkey and the Wolf. My friend Mason does this high-end, lowbrow, highbrow food. It's his own unique take on it. And that's what I like. I like when people take their food and not hold a bunch of seriousness themselves, but put a ton of effort into their food. We spent a lot of time at Mofo, my friend Mike's place. Willa Jean, my friend Kelly, real badass. Let's see, what else? Company Burger is a great burger. Compare Le Pain. Chef Nina does a killer job there. I could go on. How many more you want?
I mean, these are all great picks. Is Coop still okay?
I have not been to Coop's in years, so I cannot comment.
Okay.
So I'm not going to comment on a place I don't go.
That was one of my favorite early spots on my first trips to New Orleans. I loved their jambalaya, but you cannot comment. Diplomatic of you. What's the big garden place? The massive Bacchanal.
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 Great wine program. I mean, just a killer wine program. And especially, I like to go when they have live music.
Yeah.
And then they'll have guest chefs do appearances. You can get a great cheese board there anytime. But the wine list, they deserve all the accolades they get.
Yeah.
And my wife is a French wine scholar, so
oh, wow.
She always likes and really appreciates good wine. In fact, if you don't have a good wine list, chances are we're not going.
That's great. Well, sorry I had to really grill you there because it is such a wonderful city to visit as a tourist who loves food.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if it was New York, Chicago, New Orleans, those are the top tier places you want to go for food. And even though we act like a big city, we're a small city, and we do have more restaurants per capita than anywhere else. So it's a rough business, but I enjoy it.
It's cool. We ask all of our guests on the Taste Podcast, if you were to have a dream cookbook project for your second book, what would that project be?
I've actually already got the title and the chapters. I wrote it in one night because I thought it was a great idea because people were telling me, yeah, the recipes are good and they're authentic and I love your stories, but man, could we have more of these psychotic stories? So what are the other wild stories I have in my brain? So this isn't even approved with the publisher yet, but Tomahawk Toups and Tales of the Psychotic Coonass or Tales of the Psychotic Cajun. Because I have all these stories from working with Emerald to growing up in Cajun country to hunting and fishing and fist fights and drinking and all these wild stories that every time I tell somebody like, wow, man, you should put that in a book. I'm like, I should put that in a book. And so far, Jennifer likes it and Denny likes it.
That's your team. That's Team Toups.
That's
Team
Toups
Bring
right
them
there.
Back together.
And we'll just tack on recipes with that and make it a wild and crazy book.
Yeah.
Because I never wanted ever just a list of recipes. I thought that was boring. I wanted to tell a story.
Yeah.
So Life and Times of the Psychotic Cajun will be coming soon, hopefully.
Let's make it happen. And maybe there'll be some knife throwing in it.
Oh, you know there is.
You're quite the knife thrower. Isaac Toups, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Thank you very much. Had a great time. Anytime, guys.
The Taste Podcast is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Anna Heasel. The show is produced by Gabrielle Lewis, studio recordings by Pat Stango, theme music by Steve Rydell. Interviews are recorded live at Books Are Magic in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, and at Penguin Random House Studios in Manhattan. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com. Thanks for listening.